Hello and welcome to our climate change program. I'm Edanur from Çarşamba Science High School and I am president of this program. Today we have a lot of valuable climate experts to answer students' questions. I hope it will be a very useful program for you and we can raise awareness. Let's start with the very first student and her question. Sedef, go ahead please.
Hi, I'm Seda from Çarşamba Science High School. I would like to ask a question to expert Rana. Is climate change caused by humans?
Yes, over 97% of scientists agree that humans cause climate change. Humanity's accelerated burning of fossil fuels and deforestation have led to rapid increases of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere and global warming. Scientists have known for centuries that gases in Earth's atmosphere like carbon dioxide and methane act like a greenhouse, preventing a certain amount of radiation from escaping back to space. The more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the warmer it gets. Over Earth's history, carbon dioxide levels fluctuate due to volcanic activity or the carbon cycle. However, the rise in temperature and the carbon dioxide levels we have seen in the past century are extreme and are accelerating. The rate of carbon emissions are the highest they have been in 66 million years, and the amount of warming in the coming decades is expected to be 250 times greater than the average warming during the past century.
Hello, I'm Balkan from Çarşamba Science High School. I would like to ask a question to expert Esma. Is it climate change, global warming, or global climate crisis?
Each of these terms refers to the same thing, the fact that the average temperature of the Earth's atmosphere is rising. As the temperature rises, various impacts are changed aspects of our climate. Hotter summers, rising ocean temperatures, melting polar ice, increased storm activity. These go beyond more changes in the weather. As these impacts grow in frequency and severity, they will, and in many cases already have, create crises for people and nature around the world. If unchecked, these impacts will spread and worsen with more animal extinction, water shortages, and displaced communities. Whatever you choose to call it, the most important thing is that we act to stop it.
Hi, my name is Ülkü. I'm a student of Sakarya Geotarian Science High School, and I have a question to Miss Soyle. How is climate change affecting animals?
First of all, thanks for your question. Let me explain. Changing climates directly and indirectly cause stress to animals across the world. Many species are approaching or have already reached the limit of where they can go to find hospitable climates. In the polar regions, animals like polar bears that live on polar ice are now struggling to survive as that ice melts. It's not just how climate change affects an animal directly, it's about how the warming climate affects the ecosystem and food chain that animal has adapted to. In the US and Canada, moose are struggling due to an increase in ticks and parasites that are surviving the shorter, milder winters. In other cases, salmon rely on steady flowing cold rivers to spawn. As climate change alters the temperature and flow of these waterways, some salmon populations are dwindling. This affects many species that rely on salmon like orcas or grizzly bears. In both oceans and on land, the changes in temperature and moisture are causing some species to migrate in search of new places to live. For instance, in North America, species are shifting their ranges an average of 11 miles north and 36 feet higher in evolution each decade to find more favorable conditions. The Central Appalachians are one resilient climate escape route that may help species adapt to changing conditions. There are some natural places with enough diversity in altitudes and geology such that as the planet warms, they can be resilient strongholds for plant and animal species. serve as breeding grounds and seed bank for many plants and animals that otherwise may be unable to find habitat due to climate change. However, strongholds are not an option for all species, and some plants and animals are blocked from reaching strongholds by human development, like cities, highways, and farmlands. I hope that my answer will be enough. Thanks for listening.
Hello, I'm Aisha from Jotunheim Science High School, and I have a question for Mrs. Shahin. I wonder what are the main threats of climate change?
Hi, thank you so much for your question. The main threats of climate change are rising sea levels, ecosystem collapse, and more frequent and severe weather. Rising temperatures from human-caused greenhouse gas emissions affects planet-wide systems in various ways. For example, it warms the polar regions and the oceans, which melts ice, corrodes the poles, and causes sea level rise. Climate change affects ocean habitats by lowering oxygen, decreasing phytoplankton, and killing coral reefs. The warming of the atmosphere affects weather patterns, causing more frequent and severe storms and droughts across many global regions. Higher temperatures are affecting the length of the seasons, and in some places are already crossing sea levels for ecosystems and humans. All of these impacts and many others will become more severe if we don't act to stop greenhouse gas emissions.
I am Esma Nur from Balıkesir Şehit Turgut Solak Science High School. I want to ask a question to the expert. How is climate change affecting people?
From straining agricultural systems to making regions less habitable, the climate change is affecting people everywhere. You may have noticed how weather patterns near you are shifting or how more frequent and severe storms are developing in the spring. Maybe your community is experiencing more severe flooding or wildfires. Many areas are even experiencing Sunday flooding as rising sea levels cause risks to the flood during high tides. In Alaska, some entire coastal communities are being moved because the sea level has risen to the point where their original location is no longer habitable. Climate change thus exacerbates the threat of human-caused conflict resulting from a scarcity of resources like food and water that are less reliable as growing seasons change, and seasons become less predictable. Many of these impacts are happening disproportionately in low-income, indigenous, or marginalized communities. Around the globe, many of the poorest nations are being impacted first and most severely by climate change, even though they have contributed far less to the increase in carbon emissions that has caused the warming in the first place.
I am Tuana from Balıkesir Şehit Turgut Solak Science High School. I want to ask a question to the expert. How is climate change affecting the ocean?
Warming ocean temperatures are melting polar ice, shifting ocean currents and fish migration and leading to coral bleaching and die-off. Because of ocean's important role in regulating Earth's climate by absorbing greenhouse gas emissions, they are taking a direct hit from climate change. All of this extra absorbed carbon dioxide is altering the chemistry of our ocean, making them more acidic. In fact, the rate of ocean acidification is the highest it has been in 300 million years. This negatively impacts lots of marine habitats and animals, but is a particular threat of shellfish who struggle to grow shells as water becomes more acidic. There are deeper issues at play. As the ocean surface warms, it is less able to mix with deep, nutrient-rich water which limits the growth of phytoplankton, little plants that serve as the base of the marine food web. This in turn affects the whole food chain. There is also some evidence that warming surface water may be contributing to slowing ocean currents. Together, these currents act like a giant global conveyor belt that transports it from the tropics toward the poles. This conveyor belt is critical for bringing nutrient-rich water towards the surface near the poles, where giant blobs of food web supporting blooms of phytoplankton occur. This is why the Arctic and Antarctic are known for having such high abundance of fish and marine mammals.
I'm Sara from Gimnazia Bjelovar, and I have a question for Hannah. How is climate change affecting water supplies?
Sara, thank you for your question. Land glaciers in the Himalayas lock up water and release it nicely for countries such as India and Pakistan in a regular manner throughout the year. The same applies to the Andes and the water supply to countries such as Peru. If the land glaciers retreat by a significant amount, the whole release mechanism will probably be compromised. Also, depending on the extent to which sea levels rise, global warming may also cause problems to water supplies and sewage disposal in coastal cities.
Nina from Gimnazia Bjelovar here. Dorotea, can you tell me when can we expect to see climate change making a noticeable impact on health?
Well, Nina, the rise in temperatures as a result of global warming will be quite slow over the next 30 years. We should not expect an instantaneous change in health factors. It is what I call a creeping catastrophe. A predicted rise of 1.5 meters in sea level by 2100 is equal to an almost invisible 1.5 centimeters per year. This is not a tsunami. It is changing at a rate slow enough for engineers to deal with in many parts of the world. But with 146 million people living within 1 meter of sea level, doing nothing about climate change over the next 100 years would have a significant effect on many lives.
I'm Inga from Gimnazia Bjelovar, and I would like to ask Mia, what are some of the indirect dangers that climate change poses to health?
Thanks, Inga. I'll try to answer your question. It's not mentioned often, but warfare is something that has a bearing on health and is potentially related to climate change. Global warming will also produce winners and losers when it comes to water supply. In those areas that become much drier, there will be an increased likelihood of fighting over water resources. It has been said that some of the conflicts in Darfur today are related to the ongoing drought and competition for water resources.
Hi, my name is Hazal from Keshap Science High School. I want to ask a question our expert Dida Su. How is climate change affecting farms and our food? Climate change is disrupting weather patterns, leading to more extreme and frequent droughts and flooding events that directly threaten harvests. The warmer climate is contributing to raising populations of insects, pests that eat a higher share of crop yields. In the Midwestern United States, more frequent and instant rains have caused devastating spring flooding, which delays and sometimes prevents planting activities. This impact make it more difficult for farmers to grow crops and sustain their livelihoods. However, farmers are poised to play a significant role in addressing climate change. Agricultural lands are among the Earth's largest natural reservoirs of carbon, and when farmers use soil health practices like cover crops, reduced tillage, and crop rotations, they can draw even more carbon out of the atmosphere. These practices also help to improve the soil's weather holding capacity, which is beneficial as water can be absorbed from the soil by crops during times of drought, and during heavy rainfalls, soil can help reduce flooding and runoff by slowing the release of water in streams. Healthier soils can also improve crop yields, boost farmers' productivity, and reduce erosion and fertilizer runoff from farm fields, which in turn means cleaner waterways for people and nature.
Hi, Hi, my name is Zeynep from Keşap Science School. I'm going to ask a question to our climate expert Yiğit. Does deforestation contribute to climate change?
Yes, deforestation contributes to climate change in a couple ways. Forests are one of our most important types of natural carbon storage. So when forests get cut down, they lose their ability to store the greenhouse gas. Burning trees release ever more carbon into the atmosphere. Forests are some of the best natural climate solutions we have on this planet. If we can slow or stop deforestation and manage natural land so that it's healthy, we could achieve up to 1/3 of the emission reductions needed by 2030 to keep global temperatures from rising more than 2 centigrade degrees. That's the equivalent of the world putting a complete stop to burning oil.
Hi, I am Ezgi from Mehmet Akif Ersoy Science High School. I would like to ask a question to the expert. What are solutions to climate change?
In order to avoid the worst impacts of climate change, the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change, IPCC, says we must reduce carbon emissions to the point where we hold global warming to no more than. In addition to the what, we must a planet commit ourselves to reaching net zero carbon emissions by 2050. This is no small feat and will require a range of solutions applied to reach the goal. We will need to transition all sectors of our economy away from fossil fuels that emit carbon, increase our use of clean energy sources like wind and solar, harness the power of nature to capture carbon, and deploy technologies that capture and store carbon. This transition will happen much faster and more cost effectively if governments enact an economy with price on carbon. Our research also shows that proper land management of forests and farmlands also called natural climate solutions can prevent up to 1/3 of the emissions reductions necessary to reach the Paris Climate Agreement's goal of aiming to keep temperature rise below degrees above pre-industrial levels. The truth, however, is that even if we do successfully reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050, we will still have to address harmful climate impacts. And so the solution to climate change must also include measures to adapt to the impacts of global warming. It is particularly important that we have the most vulnerable communities adapt to climate change impacts. For example, Pacific Islanders and disadvantaged communities living in low-lying areas of Houston, Miami, or Jakarta are the least responsible for the emissions causing climate change, but the most likely to suffer the consequences.
Hi, I'm Gülnisa from Mehmet Akif Ersoy Science High School. I would like to ask a question to the experts. What is TNC doing about climate change?
The Nature Conservancy is committed to tackling climate change, both to limit the worst impacts of climate change and to help vulnerable people and places deal with its already tangible impacts like increasingly extreme weather conditions. We are doing so by enhancing nature's ability to draw down and store carbons across forests, farmlands, and wetlands by accelerating the deployment of nature climate solutions, mobilizing action for a clean energy future and new low-carbon technologies, building resilience through natural defense such as strophic reefs, mangroves, and wetlands that reduce the impact of storms and floods, restoring and bolstering the resilience of vulnerable ecosystems like coral reefs, helping countries around the world implement and enhance their commitments to the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement. We are helping to build trust among countries and reducing the narrative that climate action by some nations gives an economic advantage to others.
Hi, I am Damla. I'm studying at Gülsar Science High School. I want to ask a question to expert Fatma. What can I do to stop climate change?
You can be part of the climate change solution. First, calculate your carbon footprint and take action you can to lower it. You might be surprised which of your activities are emitting the most greenhouse gases. It's really important that we use our voices for climate action. Tell your policy makers that you care about climate change and want to see them enact laws and policies that address greenhouse gas emission and climate impacts. One of the simplest and most important things that everyone can do is to talk about climate change with family and friends. We know that conversation can seem like a recipe for discord and hard feelings. It starts with meeting people where they are at. TNC has resources to help you break the climate silence and pave the way for action on global warming.
I'm Fatmada Erdan from Gülsar Science High School. I would like to ask expert Güfidan one question. How much renewable energy do we need to stop climate change?
We need to increase renewable energy at least ninefold from where it is today to meet the goals of 2015 Paris Agreement and avoid the worst climate change impacts. Every watt that we can shift from fossil fuel to renewables like wind power or solar power is a step in the right direction. The best science we have tells us that to avoid the worst impacts of global warming, we must globally achieve net zero carbon emissions no later than 2050. To do this, world must immediately identify pathways to reduce carbon emissions from all sectors: transportation, electricity, and industry. This cannot be achieved without a major shift to renewable energy. Clean energy and technological innovation are not only helping mitigate climate change, but also create jobs and support economic growth in communities across the world. Renewable energy such as wind and solar have experienced remarkable growth and huge cost improvements over the past decade with no signs of slowing down. Prices are declining rapidly, and renewable energy is becoming increasingly competitive with fossil fuels all around the world. In some places, new renewable energy is already cheaper than continuing to operate old, inefficient, and dirty fossil fuel-fired power plants.
Hello, I'm Kim from Exercise High School. My question is, how much time do we have to stop climate change?
Thanks for this nice question. The truth is there's not a hard and fast deadline on climate action versus inaction. Some studies and articles suggest that unless we make significant progress towards decarbonization, reducing carbon from the atmosphere and replacing fossil fuels in our economies, by 2030 we may be facing catastrophic climate impacts that will overwhelm our communities and pose an existential threat to certain ecosystems. There is no definitive line of demarcation that we can protect against. Instead, it's a matter of minimizing the effects of the climate change. Every day that goes by, we are releasing carbon into the atmosphere and increasing our planetary risk. Most scientists agree that we need to begin in reducing carbon emissions right now to give our planet and our population the future that is least impacted.
Hello, I am Ade from Oxford Science High School, and my question is, can't renewable energy hurt the environment?
Thanks for the question.
It's true that without proactive planning, renewable energy developments could displace up to 76 million acres of farm and wildlife habitats on area the size of Arizona. Fortunately, TNC students have found that we can meet clean energy demands 17 times over without converting more natural habitats. The key is to deploy new energy infrastructure of the wild of previously covered areas such as agricultural lands, mine cities, and other transformed terrain at a lower cost. Thoughtful planning is required at every step. For instance, much of the United States wind potential is in the Great Plains, a region with the best remaining grassland habitat on the continent. TNC at the right place to site wind turbines in this region in order to catalyze renewable energy responsibly.
I am Barış from Macit Zeren Science High School. I want to ask a question to expert Ilgin. What happens if we do nothing to stop climate change?
If we do not take further action to stop climate impacts we are already experiencing, the planet is likely to see global temperatures rise by 2 to 4 Fahrenheit by the end of the century. This type of warming could lead to catastrophic melting of the ice sheets in Greenland and Antarctica, causing sea level rise that would flood most major global coastal cities. The wildlife will live and their habitat will be destroyed, leading to mass species extinction. Superstorms, drought, and heat waves would become increasingly common and more extreme, leading to major health crises and illness. Agricultural production would plummet, leading to global food shortage and famine. Water supplies would disappear around the world, making some regions nearly uninhabitable.
I am Majid from Macit Zeren Science High School. I want to ask a question to expert Elif Naz. Is it hopeless to stop climate change?
The good news is that climate change is not an impossible problem. We know what causes it and what to do to stop it. It will take courage, ambition, and details beyond lofty announcements. Reaching net zero carbon emissions by 250 is an ambitious goal, one that's going to require substantial effort across every sector of economy. We don't have a lot of time, but if we are prepared to act now and act together, we can substantially reduce the rate of global warming and prevent the worst impacts of climate change from coming to pass. What's most encouraging is that low carbon economy that we need to create will also give us cleaner air, better energy choices, new jobs, and may even save us money. Likewise, many of the natural solutions that we need to adapt to even today's climate change impacts benefits of cleaner air and water, more natural recreation opportunities and jobs.
Thank you to students for their questions and also thanks for our experts to their important answers. I hope it has been a very useful program. Have responsive and good days. See you later.